Let me tell you something a narcissist will never openly acknowledge. The thing that breaks them the most isn't when you cut off contact. What destroys them far more intensely is something quieter, deeper, and far more unexpected. It's not your disappearance that unravels them, it's when you stop needing them emotionally, psychologically, and energetically while still existing right in front of them. That is the loss they are completely unequipped to handle. If you've ever felt that internal shift, that moment where you stop reacting, say "I feel this," because that clarity is the very thing they pray you never discover. A narcissist is far more shaken when you detach internally before you physically leave, because it dismantles the entire illusion of dominance they depend on. They don't fear you walking away in the way you've imagined. What terrifies them is losing access to your emotional world, to the responses, energy, and mental space you once allowed them to influence. When you silently reclaim yourself, they sense something shifting even if they cannot describe it. Suddenly they no longer feel essential, no longer feel extraordinary, and no longer feel superior. Your emotional disconnection disrupts the stream of attention, fear, hope, and uncertainty they had been feeding on. They lived off your reactions as if it kept their entire ego alive, so when you detach, it feels as if you've taken away the oxygen they had been breathing. They feel this loss not because you are gone, but because you are no longer emotionally available for them to drain. Your detachment sends a message they cannot distort. Their words no longer sway your mood, and their behavior no longer shapes your emotional state. They cannot assert control over someone whose inner world has stepped outside their grasp, even if the person is still sitting right beside them. They feel you slipping away where it matters most inside yourself. Emotional detachment delivers a blow more threatening than any exit, because it shows them the bond they relied on has dissolved without warning. When you detach internally, their ability to trigger guilt, fear, shame, confusion, or hope disappears, and that loss strips away the illusion of power they were clinging to. It forces them to face the truth that the dependence they believed you would always have on them has been replaced with self-respect and clarity. Their tactics suddenly become ineffective, and that collapse shatters the grandiosity they hide behind. The thing that crushes them isn't losing your physical presence, it's realizing you reclaimed your emotional independence. They feel wiped out in a way that no contact alone can't achieve, because now they sense you have emotionally evolved past them while they remain addicted to your reactions. They fear your indifference more than your absence. Absence can be rewritten in their imagination. They can tell themselves that you're hurting, missing them, secretly checking on them. They can turn silence into a fantasy that still feeds their ego. But indifference leaves nothing to reinterpret. When you remain present but unmoved, or you communicate without an emotional charge, their entire illusion of importance collapses. Indifference leaves them with no emotional thread to pull, no reaction to provoke, no storyline to twist. They can no longer pretend you need them when your eyes, tone, energy, and presence show that you don't. Indifference communicates the one truth they are terrified to face. They have lost their influence over you. Narcissists survive on emotional intensity. Anger energizes them. Tears reassure them. Defensiveness convinces them they matter. Arguments supply their ego. Even your silence, if filled with fear or tension, nourishes them. But true indifference starves every part of their identity. They can't pull you in. They can't destabilize you. They can't provoke the emotional storms that once made them feel powerful. All they see is a version of you who no longer bends to their emotional highs or lows, and for them, that feels like vanishing. What intensifies the damage is that indifference strips them of the fantasy where they remain superior. If you are indifferent, It means you have healed past them, grown beyond them, and reached a clarity they cannot influence. Your neutrality reflects back their emotional emptiness. They can handle silence because it can be romanticized into meaning, but neutrality becomes a mirror they can't escape. It shows them that they simply don't matter to you anymore, and losing significance wounds them deeper than any distance ever could. Indifference tears away the grandiose fantasy they protect themselves with, leaving them face to face with a truth they cannot twist. Their power was never in their presence, it was always in your reactions, and the moment those reactions stop, even if you're standing right there, their psychological framework begins to fall apart. They depend on your emotional responses, your stress, explanations, confusion, hurt, attempts to fix things, even the fearful silence you once held. Those reactions told them they still had authority over your emotional world. When your reactions disappear, they feel an internal panic because their entire identity depends on emotional control. A narcissist expects you to engage in their chaos. They expect defenses when they accuse you. They expect reassurance when they manipulate. They expect you to chase when they pull away. They expect you to prove your loyalty when they create confusion. Your reactions are their power source. When you stop giving those reactions, they feel themselves becoming irrelevant. Their dominance isn't rational, it is emotional. When your emotional system no longer responds to their moods, their tactics stop working, and nothing terrifies them more than realizing their impact has died. This lack of reaction strikes their ego because it confirms the one thing they fear the most. You've outgrown them. Their control relied on the belief that they dictated your emotional climate. When you no longer look to them for approval, validation, or emotional stability, they feel the ground beneath them crack. They sense the shift instantly, your calm tone, your steady presence, your refusal to be triggered. All of it sends the message that their emotional influence is gone. What devastates them is watching you regain your stability as they remain trapped in their inner chaos. When you stop reacting, you stop participating in their emotional game. They feel powerless because you've stepped outside the dynamic they depend on. That powerlessness exposes the dependency they had on your emotional energy, and once that dependency is exposed, they realize they have nothing left to manipulate. Your emotional neutrality dismantles their illusion of dominance. A narcissist needs to believe they can sway your feelings, shake your confidence, alter your mood, and define your worth. This belief holds their entire identity together. When your neutrality breaks that illusion, they feel exposed and unprotected. Your calm doesn't come from emptiness, it comes from understanding. You've seen their patterns. You recognize the manipulation. You no longer absorb the blame, you no longer chase clarity, and with that shift, the emotional fuel they relied on disappears. Suddenly nothing they do has an effect. When they insult you and you don't defend yourself, when they try to provoke you and you remain steady, when they try to guilt you and you feel nothing, they panic because your neutrality proves their control has completely fallen apart. Their old tactics hit a wall. You're no longer confused, no longer hoping, no longer tangled in the illusion, and that realization devastates them. They're used to your emotional responses, whether pain, longing, anger, or hope. Those reactions gave them a sense of relevance. They could tell themselves you still cared, that you were tied to them, that they mattered. Your neutrality eliminates that illusion and forces them to confront the truth they run from. Their power existed only as long as you reacted. Once that stops, they become irrelevant. For them, irrelevance is annihilation. When they realize they can't pull you back into the emotional web, they understand that the control they believed they had was only ever borrowed from your engagement. Without your participation, there is no game left to play. Their manipulation becomes useless against someone who sees through it. What devastates them the most isn't the end of the relationship, it's losing access to the emotional energy that defined their sense of self. They don't bond with people, they bond with the emotional supply people provide. They attach themselves to your reactions, your attention, your fear, your confusion, your attempts to fix things, your hope for change. These emotional outputs are their lifeline. They rely on your emotional world to avoid confronting their own emptiness. Losing that access collapses something inside them because their identity was tied to how deeply they could affect you. Your emotional energy was the mirror they used to avoid seeing themselves. When that mirror disappears, they have to face the void within them. Emotional detachment removes the one thing they counted on, your predictable responses. Whether you argued, cried, explained, defended, or blamed yourself, every reaction fed them. Even your pain made them feel powerful. But when their chaos no longer causes an emotional ripple in you, when your mind no longer loops trying to figure out their behavior, when your body doesn't tighten around their moods, that loss of emotional supply feels like abandonment on a level they cannot understand. It's like losing the only source of identity they know how to connect to. They don't know how to generate self-worth within themselves. They don't know how to regulate their own emotions. And when you detach emotionally, the illusion they depended on collapses, and they are left alone with the emptiness they've spent their entire lives trying to outrun.